This is a Sicha from Likutei Sichos, Chelek Tezayin, Parshas Vayakhel, Sicha Gimel, and the topic of the Sicha is that in this week's Parsha, all the way towards the end of the Parsha, we learn the pasuk that speaks about the curtain in front of the Chatzar. And the pasuk says that Umasach Shari Chatzar, this curtain, this screen that was at the gate of the courtyard, it tells us what materials it was made out of, and then the pasuk concludes and tells us the size of this curtain. And it says Ve'esrim Ama Eirech, V'Kayma Bereichav Chomish Amos. It was 20 Amos wide and 5 Amos high. And then the pasuk concludes and says Lu'umas Kali HaChatzar. And we learn the teaching of Rashi on these last 3 words of Lu'umas Kali HaChatzar. What do those words mean? And there are 5 parts in the Sikha. The Rebbe will, number 1, ask 2 questions on Rashi. Number 2, negate a possible quote-unquote extra to the second question. The Rebbe is going to say that it seems that the second question is especially strong, but the Rebbe will negate this part of the question, and this includes an extensive discussion of the Gemara. Number 3, the Rebbe will answer the questions. Number 4, based on this, the Rebbe will answer a question in halacha and also connect it to an area of halacha. And finally, number 5, explain it in Pnimiyus Einyanim. On the pasuk of Umasach Shar HaChatzar, where it tells us the size of this masach, it says Ve'esrim Ama Eirech, that it was 20 Amos wide, the Kema Bereich of Chomish Amos, and it was 5 Amos high. And then the pasuk concludes, Lu'umas Kale HaChatzar. So the Kale HaChatzar we know are the curtains that surround the Chatzar. What does the word Lu'umas mean? So Rashi quotes the words Lu'umas Kale HaChatzar, and he explains it means Kemidas Kale HaChatzar, like the size of the curtains around the courtyard, which were also 5 Amos high. Now, Mefarshim explained that Rashi is coming to teach us that the word Lu'umas is not the way it's usually translated, Keneged, opposite. Because here we can't translate Lu'umas to mean Keneged, opposite. Because the Shar HaChatzar, this curtain at the gate, was on the side of the Kali HaChatzar, and it was not Keneged, opposite the Kali HaChatzar. So rather here, Rashi is teaching us that Lu'umas means Kimidas, that it was the same size, the same height as the Kali HaChatzar. And there are 2 questions here. The first question is, if we go according to these Mefarshim, and we explain that Rashi is only coming to translate the word Lu'umas, then why does Rashi also quote the words Kale HaChatzar? He's not explaining those words. Why does he quote them from the pasuk? And this question is especially difficult, since Rashi repeats it. He repeats the words Kale HaChatzar in his explanation. And he says, what's the meaning of Lu'umas Kale HaChatzar? It is Kimidas Kale HaChatzar. According to these Mefarshim, Rashi should have just said in short that what does the word Lu'umas mean? It means Kemidas. The second question is, there are other places in Chumash where the word Lu'umas cannot be translated as Keneged. We find this by, number 1, Lu'umas Machbarte, by the Ephod in Parshas Tetzaveh, and also in Parshas Vayikra, when it talks about the animal's tail, it says Lu'umas Ha'otza. And there Rashi explains in Parshas Tetzaveh that it means Samoch L'mayla, near it and above it, and in Parshas Vayikra that it just means L'mayla. Now, according to this, Rashi should have also said here that Lu'umas means Samoch L'mayla, meaning, what would be the meaning of the pasuk? That the Masach Shar HaChatzar was 5 Amos higher than the Kale HaChatzar. And so the question is, why does Rashi translate it to be Kemidas, which isn't found as a translation for the word Lu'umas anywhere else in the entire Chumash? Moreover, to add to the second question, this explanation of Samoch L'mayla l'chera fits better than Kemidas. Because if it means L'mayla, then it's understood why it must say the words Lu'umas Kale HaChatzar. Because these words tell us the height of the Masach Shar HaChatzar. It's 5 Amos higher than the Kale HaChatzar. However, if it means Kemidas, that the Masach Shar HaChatzar was the same height as the Kale HaChatzar, then the words Lu'umas Kale HaChatzar are extra, since it already says in the pasuk V'Kayma Bereichav Chomish Amos. So why does it have to add that this is Kemidas Kale HaChatzar? It should just say that it's 5 Amos high. What's the need to add like the height of the curtains around the Chatzar? Now we're going to move on to a long discussion, which based on it, we're going to strengthen the second question even further. However, as we'll see, at the end, we're going to remove this extra strengthening of the second question. So this second question is especially difficult according to an earlier teaching of Rashi. And we'll understand this by first prefacing that in the Gemara in Zvachim, there is a machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yesi regarding the height of the Mizbeach, which as we'll see later, Rashi also brings this machlekes. Rabbi Yehuda says that when it says in Parshas Truma about the Mizbeach HaChitzin, the outer Mizbeach, that it's V'shalish Amos Kemosei, it's 3 Amos high. So Rabbi Yehuda says, Dvarim Kichsavim. It's exactly as it says. It was 3 Amos high. And Rabbi Yesi says, no. Nemer kan Ravua v'nemer b'pnimi Ravua. It says over here that the Mizbeach is Ravua, and it says about the Mizbeach HaPnimi, the inner Mizbeach, that it's also Ravua. And we learn out, Mala halon gavei pi shnayim ka'arkei. Just like over there, the height was twice the size of the length. Afkan gavei pi shnayim ka'arkei. So to here, the height is twice the size of the length. And since the length was 5 amos, the height was 10 amos. Now the Gemara says over there that Amrle Rabbi Yehuda said to Rabbi Yesi, Efsher koyin oimed al gabe amizbeach va'avoda b'yadei v'chola rein esim b'chutz. Does it make sense that the koyin is standing on the mizbeach hachitzin and he's doing the avoda and everybody's able to see him from the outside? Because if the mizbeach is 10 amos high and the kalei achotzer, the curtains, are only 5 amos high, then people from the outside could see the koyin doing the avoda. And the Gemara says that Rabbi Yesi answered that Rabbi Yesi holds that the height of the claim of the curtains around the chutzner was not 5 amos high, but rather it was 15 amos high, and so people on the outside were unable to see the kohen doing the avodah on the mizbeach. Continuing with the introduction to the question. Now the Gemara in Eruvin says that the shear of a Pesach, of a doorway, according to the Rabbanon, is 20 amos high and 10 amos wide. And the Gemara asks over there, Lelfu mi Pesach shara chotzer, let them learn from the opening of the gateway of the chotzer and say, Mala halan chomish bereichav esrim, afkan chomish bereichav esrim. And we'll see what this question means in a moment. And the Gemara answers in its second answer, and according to the way Taisus learns it, that kloim tesvav amo, v'chiksiv v'koima bereichav hei amis, misfas kloim ulamayla. And Taisus explains that the Gemara's question is on the shear of 20 amos of the height of a Pesach. Because we see that a Pesach is only 5 amos high. So the way we read the question going back is Leil Fumi Pesach Shara Chotzer. Let them learn from the doorway to the Chotzer that Malahalin Chomish, just like over there, it was 5 amos high. So every doorway should only be up to 5 amos high. And the Gemara answers that also the Pesach HaChotzer was 20 amos high. In the words of the Gemara going back, Kloim Tesvav Amma. The curtains around were 15 amos high. And when it says that the doorway was 5 amos, it means misfas kloim ulamayla. It means 5 amos higher than the curtains, which is a total of 20 amos. The meaning of v'koima bereichav hei amos is misfas kloim ulamayla, meaning 5 amos higher than the kloim, which according to Rabbi Yesi were 15 amos high. So it comes out that according to Rabbi Yesi, according to the way Taisus learns the Gemara, the meaning of Lu'umas Kalei Chotzer is higher than the Kalei Chotzer. And this leads now into the strengthening of this second question. Now since we see that earlier in Parshas Truma, Rashi presents both opinions of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yesi, so therefore here too, on his explanation of Lu'umas Kalei Chotzer, he should have explained Lu'umas means Samuch L'maylo. And not only since, as we said, it fits better in the Lashon, because we don't find that Lu'umas means Kemidas anywhere else, but also because it fits with the opinion of Rabbi Yesi, which Rashi himself teaches. So it should fit perfectly into this continuation of Rashi, based on what he said in Parshas Truma. It should fit nicely into Rashi over here. However, in truth, this isn't the question, because this whole discussion has no place in the way Rashi learns based on Pshut Shemikra. As we see that Rashi explains on the pasuk in the end of Parshas Truma, where it says Eirech HaChatzer tells us the length of the Chatzer, and then it says V'koima Chomish Amos, that the height of the curtains of the Chatzer was 5 amos. Rashi says that V'koima Chomish Amos Goiva Mechitzeis HaChatzer. This is the height of the walls of the Chatzer. V'hu Reichav HaKlaim. It's also the widths of these Klaim. Meaning that even though Rashi brings the opinion of Rabbi Yesi by the Mizbeach, that the Mizbeach was 10 amos high, nevertheless, regarding the Goiva Mechitzes HaChatzer, the height of the walls of the Chatzer, he says simply Chomish Amos, because Rashi says simply that the height of the Mechitzes is 5 amos, and it doesn't distinguish between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yesi. So therefore, we must say that according to Derech HaPshat, even according to the Pirush, to the opinion that the height of the Mizbeach was 10 amos, nevertheless, the height of the walls of the Chatzer was only 5 amos. And what about the question that someone on the outside could see the Kohen doing the Avodah on the Mizbeach? The reason for this is understood very simply. There's no need in Derech HaPshat that someone on the outside shouldn't be able to see how the Kohen did the Avodah on the Mizbeach. And therefore Rashi explains v'koyma chomish amis, simply that it was actually 5 amas high, and he doesn't bring any additional opinion. And therefore it's understood that we can also say regarding the height of the Sha'ar Chotzer that according to Derech Pshat it was only 5 amas according to all opinions. However, our original question stands that the translation of Lu'umas to mean Lamaila is a better translation than to say that it means Kemidas. Now we're going to move on to answering these two questions. And over here we're going to present the main point of the answer, which is to understand what's bothering Rashi. And based on that, we're going to answer both questions. So the explanation of this is as follows. Rashi explains the words Lu'umas Kalei Chotzer because the 3 words are L'cheira extra. Even if we say it means 5 amas higher than the Kloyim, as we asked, that then the words aren't extra, it's still difficult. Because why does the Torah need to inform us of the height of the Sha'ar Chotzer, the gateway of the Chotzer, through a diuk? It's a diuk. We're learning it's 5 amas higher than the Kalei Chotzer, and by writing at length, it's also much longer. It says Chomish amas lu'umas Kalei Chotzer, when it could simply say in short and clearly that it was Eser amas. So regardless of how we explain these words, there's going to be a difficulty over here. And that is that these words are extra. If the pasuk means to say that the Sha'ar Chotzer is 5 amas high, then there's no need at all to write Lu'umas Kalei Chotzer. It already said that it was 5 amas high. Why add Lu'umas Kalei Chotzer? And even if it means to say that it's 5 amas higher than the Kalei Chotzer, then the question is that it's just written at length and through a diuk, when it could write in short and straightforward, that it was not 5 amas higher than the Kalei Chotzer, but simply that it was 10 amas high. So instead of writing Chomish amas lu'umas Kalei Chotzer, it could say Eser amas, and not add these 3 words at all. So now we answered our first question. Why does Rashi quote the words Lu'umas Kalei Chotzer? Because he's coming to address the need for these 3 words. His question is on all 3 of these words. And therefore Rashi says that the pasuk is coming here to give a reason why the height of the Masach Sha'ar Chotzer had to be Chomish amas and not higher, like the Masach Pesach HaOyel, the inner part of the Mishkan, which was 10 amas high. So Rashi tells us that that's what the pasuk is coming to explain. That this is because it had to be Kemidas Kalei Chotzer. So the meaning of the words Lu'umas Kalei Chotzer is the reason and explanation for why it's 5 amas high. So the pasuk told us the height, it's 5 amas. And now the question arises, why 5 amas and not 10 amas like the Masach Pesach HaOyel? So the pasuk continues and says, Lu'umas Kalei Chotzer. The pasuk is emphasizing that the Masach is in its teichen, meaning in its purpose, it's the same and a part of the kloim. And it's for this reason that its height had to be exactly the same as their height. According to this, we answered our second question. Because Rashi is not going to tell us that La'umas means higher than, because then the words are extra. It could just say Eser amas. Why does it have to say 5 amas higher than the Kalei Chotzer? The question would still be there. The only way to answer the question is to say that it's telling us that the height is 5 amas. And then the pasuk continues and gives us the explanation and the reason for why it was 5 amas high. Lu'umas Kalei Chotzer, because its teichen, its purpose, is the same and a part of the kloim. And therefore, just like the kloim are 5 amas high, the Masach Pesach HaChotzer is also 5 amas high. Now we're going to move on to present 2 side points. And the first one is how, based on this explanation of Rashi, we're able to answer a question of the Balei HaTosfos, which is found in the Das Kenim. Based on this, the halacha question of the Balei HaTosfos is answered. The Balei HaTosfos ask, Im lo hoyu gvoyim elo chomish amas, if they were only 5 amas high, im kain, if so, lo hoya pesach ashar gvoya, then the doorway of the Chotzer was not as high, like the opening of the Heichel of the Beis HaMikdash. And therefore, because of this question, the Balei HaTosfos explain that the Kloim on the east side, and therefore also the Pesach HaChotzer, were 20 amas high. However, according to the way Rashi learns, there's no question in the first place. The pasuk actually addresses this very question by adding the words Lu'umas Kalei Chotzer. It's teaching us that the Masach Sha'ar Chotzer is a part of the Kalei Chotzer without specifying any particular side. That means it's like the entire Kalei Chotzer. And therefore, because the Masach Sha'ar Chotzer is a part of the Kalei Chotzer, they were the same height as the Kloim. And for this very reason, the Sha'ar didn't have the gedder of an actual Pesach like the Pesach of the Heichel, but rather it has the gedder of the Kalei Chotzer. So we can't ask any questions on this Masach Sha'ar Chotzer, comparing it to any Pesach, because its Geder is not that of a Pesach, but rather its Geder is that of the Kalei HaChotzer. Now we're going to move on to the second point, which is how we have added clarity in this based on a discussion in Rishonim about the Chiyuv of Mezuzah. This Chiddush that we just learned, that the Masach Sha'ar Chotzer is essentially a part of the Kloim, so it will be understood more clearly based on an explanation of Machlikas Rishonim in regards to Chiyuv Mezuzah. The Rambam lists among the conditions which are Mechayev a house to have a Mezuzah, so he says about the doorway that V'yu loy dlosis, it has to have doors. However, the Ravid holds that also a Pesach, also a doorway without a delis, is mechuyev to have a mezuzah. Now we can explain that the machlekes is based on how we explain and understand the geder of a delis. What is a delis? One way of looking at it is that a delis is part of the shar, it's part of the doorway whose inyan is psicha, to enter and exit. The delis is part of that. Another way of looking at it is that a delis is an inyan for itself. Actually, its inyan is sgira, to close the doorway. Without the delis, there would be a constant open Pesach, an open opening, and the delis closes the Pesach, the opening. And the nafkamina and halacha between these two agdaras is regarding chiyuv mezuzah. If we accept that a delis is part of the shar and its inyan is psicha, so then it makes sense that the chiyuv of mezuzah, which is connected with the place of knisa and yitzia of the house, is only when the Pesach is in its regular and complete manner, which is when it has a delis, since the delis gives the possibility to enter the house. However, if we say that the geder of a delis is to be soisim, to close the opening of the Pesach, then there's no place to say that the chiyuv of mezuzah in the Pesach and shar of the house, the place of knisa and yitzia, should be connected with a delis whose inyan is to not allow knisa and yitzia. Its inyan is to be soisim, the space of the knisa and yitzia. So the Rambam holds that a delis is a part of the shar and its inyan is psicha, and so therefore there's only a chiyuv mezuzah when there's a delis, and the Ravid holds that actually a delis is sgira, to be soisim the Pesach. And here we see the approach of Rashi on the Torah in this matter. Rashi learns that the Masach Sha'ar Chotzer had to be kemidas kalei chotzer, since it's essentially a part of the kloim, meaning just like the inyan of the kloim is stima, to close off the area, so to the inyan of the Masach Sha'ar Chotzer is not a part of the Pesach Sha'ar Chotzer, the opening, but rather stima, like its name, Masach, which is, as Rashi says, Loshin Megan, meaning that it's closing it off, it's protecting it, it's securing it. From this, it's also understood regarding the geder of a delis, because the Masach Sha'ar Chotzer is in place of a delis, as explained in Shuvas Rabbi Avram ben Arambam, that according to Rashi, the inyan of a delis is sgira and not psicha, like the opinion of the Ravid. And this also fits with the approach of Rashi on Shas, where again he holds, like the Ravid, that also a Pesach without a delis is mechuyev to have a mezuzah. This question about the geder of a delis in the Chelek of halacha in Torah is also found regarding the inyan of delis in the Chelek of Seid in Torah. Delis in Pnimis Einyanim is Sfiras HaMalchus, since Sfiras HaMalchus is the Mumutza between Olam HaAtzilus and the Olamas which are lower than Atzilus, and in general Sfiras HaMalchus is the Mumutza between one Olam and the Olam which is lower than it. Now in Sfiras HaMalchus there are two Inyanim. Number one, Malchus is Mailim on the Sfiras which are above it, and because of this, Malchus is called Yam, because just like the Yam is Mailim on the things that are in it, so too Malchus is Mailim on the Sfiras which are above it. And through this Helam we have number two, which is that Malchus brings down and is Megale, the Eir of Atzilus, to the lower Elamus, which because of this, Malchus is called Eretz. Like on the land, we can see everything. And here is the question. What is the Iker in Sfiras HaMalchus? Is it the inyan of Helam, or the inyan of Gilui, which is in and through it? Is it the inyan of Stima, or is it the inyan of Psicha? The answer, according to Rashi, is Lu'umas Kalei Chotzer, Kimidas Kalei Chotzer, in Olam Apshat, which is Olam Asiyah, our world. The inyan of the Masach and Delis of Sfiras HaMalchus is the Kloim, which the Kloim is the inyan of Helam and Stima. That's the whole idea of the walls around the Mishkan. even though the Helam of Sfiras Malchus also has an effect on the Elamis of Bria and Yetzirah, which therefore the Eir Eliki doesn't shine in them in a revealed way, as in Atzilus, which is Elam Achdus. Nevertheless, there in the Elamis of Bria and Yetzirah, there's Nimshach in them an Inyan of Gilei Lakus. And therefore, Bria is an Elam which is Rubai Tev, and Yetzirah is at least Mechza al Mechza. However, in Elam Asiyah, it's total Helam. Like it says that it's Elam HaKlippus v'Sitra Achra, and Kol Maisa Elam has a Koshem v'Royim v'Hashem Gevrim Boy, and therefore Elam Asiyah mainly feels the effect of the Helam of Malchus. However, that being said, the Tachlis HaKavana is to be mevatel the Helam, that there should be Gilei Elikus, and for this reason it doesn't say clearly in the Torah that it's Kimidas Kalei Achotzer, but rather Le'umas Kalei Achotzer. It doesn't emphasize that it's the same exact as the Kalei Achotzer. It uses a word Le'umas. The word Le'umas doesn't mean that it's exactly the same, but rather that it's somewhat similar. Like we say, Zeh Le'umas Zeh. Meaning to say that the Masach Sha'ar Chotzer isn't exactly the same as the claim, which are constant and total Hefsek and Helam. Rather, the Torah gives the Koyach to transform the Masach into an union of Psicha and Gilui. And this transformation is to the extent that the Psicha becomes like the Pischei Shel Ulam, which it says about the Pischei Shel Ulam, that Loi Hoyu Ba'idlasei Shetamid Hoya Pasuach. It didn't have any doors and it was always open. Meaning that the Gilui becomes constant to the fullest extent without any alamas. And that it's v'nigluk v'edavaya v'ro chobasar yachtov kibi avaya dibber, a total and absolute and complete Gilui of the highest level. And once again, we see here the hafla in Pirush Rashi al Torah from a short teaching of Rashi, Lu'umas Kalei Achotzer, Kimidas Kalei Achotzer, which at first glance it looks like a basic translation. What is Lu'umas? It's Kimidas. We can take out not only how in this teaching the rule of Anile Basi Elo L'Pshitas Shel Mikro stands out, but rather also how in Rashi there are Inyanim Meflayim, also in regards to Piskei Halachis, and how this Pirush on the Torah fits with the opinion of Rashi in his Pirush on the Shas, and also how the way the Inyanim are based on Pshat and Halacha fit with the way they're explained in Kabbalah and Chassidus.